Have you ever bought like a cheap energy drink at the store, and then suddenly your social media feed is just completely flooded with ads for extreme sports gear?
Oh, yeah. Like immediately.
Right. And no, despite what everyone jokes about at parties, your phone isn't secretly recording your conversations.
I mean, that would be highly illegal, but also totally unnecessary.
Exactly. It's actually doing something much more powerful and, frankly, a lot more accurate. It is doing the math on your habits.
Yeah, the math is staggering when you really look under the hood. You realize very quickly that what feels like magic or, maybe a little bit of corporate espionage is just incredibly efficient data architecture. It's working exactly as designed.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to really pull back the curtain on that exact architecture. We're unpacking a massive presentation on data-driven marketing and MarTech.
Which stands for marketing technology for anyone unfamiliar.
Right, marketing technology. And we're going to look at this invisible machinery through the lens of three of the most dynamic, just hyper-connected digital landscapes in the world right now. We're talking about Vietnam, the Philippines, and Taiwan.
It's a fascinating cross-section.
It really is. Because if you've ever wondered how modern shopping feels so insanely personalized, well, we are going to decode the engine that's making it happen.
And, to really understand that engine, you first have to grasp the sheer size of the highway it's driving on.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, because the foundational context from early 2025 paints a picture of regions where digital connectivity is it's the absolute default state of being.
So paint that picture for us. How deep does this connectivity actually go in these specific regions?
Well, let's look at Vietnam first. You have over 78.44 million internet users.
Wow.
Right. And they are living heavily on platforms like Zalo, TikTok, and Facebook. Then you jump over to the Philippines, and it's 97.5 million internet users.
That's practically the whole population.
Basically, yeah. And with a deeply ingrained mobile-first culture, they do everything on their phones. And then there's Taiwan, which is practically entirely online. Household internet access there is hitting 93.4%.
That is just wild.
It is. And in these environments, almost every single consumer is leaving a continuous, massive digital footprint every single hour of the day.
Okay, so the best way I can picture the shift this creates for a brand is kind of like this. Marketing used to be like standing on a balcony with a megaphone.
Sure.
You're just shouting into this massive crowd and crossing your fingers that someone down there cares about what you're selling.
The old spray and pray method.
Exactly. But today, data is the insight that tells you exactly who to talk to in that crowd. And MarTech is the tool that lets you, whisper the perfect, custom-tailored offer directly into millions of individual ears at the exact same time.
That analogy hits the nail on the head, but the immediate challenge then becomes, well, how do you decide what to whisper?
Right, because you can't possibly handwrite 10 million different messages.
You really can't. So you have to rely on segmentation. And this is really the first pillar of data-driven marketing. It's moving away from guesswork and moving toward analytical facts.
So you aren't just sending a generic blast to the entire crowd anymore.
Never. I mean, doing that now is just throwing money away.
Yeah.
Analytics is the process of mining all that data we talked about to find patterns. Who is buying? When are they buying? What specific items are just sort of lingering in their carts?
Abandoned carts.
Oh, we will definitely get to abandoned carts later. But once you extract those answers, you segment. You split that massive crowd into distinct, manageable groups based on shared traits.
Okay, can we get an example from the source material?
Absolutely. Take a fashion brand in Vietnam. They divide their audience based on actual transaction history. So segment 1 might be their VIPs.
Big spenders.
Right. Customers spending over 1.2 million VND who buy frequently. You reward that loyalty by giving them exclusive early access to new lines.
Which is a completely different message than you'd send to somebody who's just casually browsing.
Entirely different. Because segment 2 might be the bargain hunters. The data reveals they only ever pull the trigger when there's a big red sale tag. So the brand saves money by only targeting them when prices drop.
Makes total sense.
And then you have segment 3, which might be the 18 to 25 demographic, who are targeted specifically through TikTok and Shopee Live because that's where they hang out.
Oh, that reminds me of the grocery store example from the presentation.
SM Retail in the Philippines.
Yes, that one. It's a massive grocery chain, right? And they analyze household buying patterns to segment family buyers from students. So the families get these weekly flyers discounting bulk rice and meat.
Because they're feeding a whole household.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While the students receive promotions for grab-and-go snacks.
Right.
But wait, I have a fundamental issue with this. Isn't that just stereotyping? Like, if I'm a student, you just assume I want a cheap snack. If I'm a mom, you assume I want diapers. Doesn't that risk alienating the customer if your assumption is completely wrong?
That is a crucial distinction to make, and it's really the core difference between the old way of marketing and the new way. What you are describing is demographic assumption.
Oh.
True data-driven segmentation is based on recorded behavioral reality.
Ah. So it's not what they think I want, it's what I've mathematically proved I want.
Precisely. The fashion brand in Vietnam isn't assuming you are a bargain hunter just because of your age or your income bracket. They know you are one because your last 5 purchases were exclusively from the clearance section.
That makes a lot of sense.
A really great example of this behavioral targeting is 7-Eleven in Taiwan. They don't guess what you want based on who you are. They react to when you engage.
With a time-based segmentation.
Yeah. They target morning commuters heavily between 7 and 9 a.m. with breakfast sets. But the moment the clock strikes 9 p.m., the system dynamically switches. It starts promoting late-night snacks to night shoppers, based purely on when those specific users historically open the app.
So it ensures brands are reacting to your actual reality, not just their assumptions about you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that. I know who my bargain hunters are, and I know when they shop. But people don't just sit on one app all day.
No, they bounce around constantly.
Right. So if I'm browsing a brand's website on my laptop, but then later I walk into their physical store to actually buy the jacket.
How does the store know I'm the exact same person? That feels like a massive missing link.
It used to be a massive blind spot, honestly.
Right.
The physical store would record a sale and have absolutely no idea what drove you there. And this brings in the concept of omnichannel tracking.
Omnichannel tracking.
Right. The goal is to track a seamless journey across every single touch point. And the way they solve that missing link you mentioned is through something called identity resolution.
Identity resolution. Okay, how does that actually work in practice? It sounds very sci-fi.
It relies on tying all these disparate data points back to a single identifier. So let's say you see a targeted ad on Facebook and you click it.
Okay, I click the ad. You browse the website anonymously on your phone, and you save an item to your favorites. The next day, the brand sends you an SMS reminder with a link.
Right, because they have my number from a previous purchase or sign up.
Exactly. And that link contains a unique tracking token. So later, you walk into the physical store, and you give them your phone number at checkout to get your loyalty points.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. The software instantly connects the token from that SMS link to your phone number, which merges your online browsing history with your in-store purchase.
Wow. So it literally maps the entire path from awareness to purchase.
Yes, it does. And those paths are highly unique depending on the specific market.
How so?
Well, in the Philippines, the data shows a heavy reliance on Messenger. People chat on Messenger and then transition directly into an e-commerce app like Lazada or Shopee.
Okay.
But in Taiwan, a typical path might start with a promotion online, move to a brand app, and then finish in a physical retail store. Tracking all of this reveals the weak points in the chain.
Like where people are dropping off.
Exactly. If everyone drops off between the website and the physical store, you know you need to fix that gap. And the source actually notes that fixing those weak points typically boosts sales by 15 to 25%.
That is a massive jump. But mapping all of this digital plumbing sounds incredibly expensive to set up. How does a brand know if tracking a single customer across 4 different platforms is even worth the effort?
That is where they calculate the customer lifetime value, or CLV.
CLV.
Right. The golden rule in data-driven marketing, going back to Barry's relationship marketing theory, is that you should never spend more money to acquire a customer than the total amount they will eventually give back to you over the life of your relationship.
Okay, I am notoriously bad at math, so you're gonna have to break down how they actually calculate that.
It is actually quite elegant. The formula is simply the average order value multiplied by the number of purchases in a year, multiplied by the number of years they stay loyal to the brand.
Let's put some real numbers to that from the source material, just so I can picture it.
Sure. Take the Highlands coffee case in Vietnam. Say a customer's average spend is 65,000 VND per visit.
Which is a fairly normal coffee run.
Right. And they come in 3 times a month. So that's 36 times a year. And historically, the data shows they stay loyal for about 4 years.
Okay.
If you do the math, that single customer represents over 9.3 million VND to that coffee shop.
Wow.
Or look at an e-commerce seller in the Philippines. The average order is 1,200 pesos. They buy 2.5 times a year, staying for 2.8 years. That's a CLV of 8,400 pesos.
Okay, and what about Taiwan?
In Taiwan, looking at a beauty brand like Watson's, an average spend of 850 new Taiwan dollars, 4 buys a year over 3.5 years. That is almost 11,900 TWD.
You know, I like to frame this like managing an investment portfolio.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, because if I run Watson's and the data clearly shows this specific customer segment is going to yield 11,900 TWD over 3 years, I am going to treat them like an absolute VIP.
You have to.
I will buy them a birthday gift. I will give them extra loyalty points. I will do literally whatever it takes to extend their stay, because keeping them is just wildly profitable compared to trying to find a brand new customer off the street.
And that is the exact strategic value of CLV. You focus your budget on retaining those high-value customers because they represent the long-term financial health of your business.
Right.
But here is the major hurdle. Calculating the CLV for tens of thousands of people and tracking their individual journeys across Facebook, Line, Shopee, and physical stores, it requires an engine.
Right, because a human being sitting at a desk with an Excel spreadsheet cannot possibly do this manually for 20,000 customers.
It's totally impossible. And this is where we really cross the bridge from data-driven marketing into MarTech. Marketing technology takes all this complex data and makes it useful at scale. And the first major job of that engine is solving a problem called multi-touch attribution.
Okay, attribution. This is basically figuring out who deserves the credit for the sale, right?
Exactly.
So let's go back to the omni-channel journey. I see a Facebook ad, I Google the product to compare prices, and then I get an email reminder a week later that finally makes me click buy. If I'm the brand, how do I know which of those channels actually worked? Do I just flip a coin?
Historically, yeah, brands use something called last-click attribution. And under that old model, the email reminder would get 100% of the credit for the sale simply because it was the final touch point before the purchase.
That is so flawed. That sounds like a basketball game where one player gets a steal, passes it up the court, another player makes a beautiful cross-court assist, but the guy who simply drops it in the hoop gets 100% of the glory and the MVP trophy.
Yes.
It totally ignores all the effort that set up the shot.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. And relying on that old last-click model leads to terrible business decisions.
Because you'd cut the wrong budgets.
Exactly. If you think the email is doing all the work, you might cut your Facebook ad budget to save money. But if you cut Facebook, the customer never learns about you in the first place, and your entire sales pipeline just dries up.
Right.
So modern MarTech tools like Google Analytics 4, HubSpot, Salesforce, or Adjust, they use multi-touch attribution.
So it distributes the credit to the passers, too, to stick with the basketball thing.
Yes, exactly. The algorithm analyzes the conversion paths and assigns fractional credit. It might determine that Facebook gets 40% of the credit for creating the initial awareness.
Okay.
Then Google Search gets 35% for assisting the comparison phase, and the email gets 25% for closing the deal. Now the brand knows exactly which combination of channels works and where to actually allocate their marketing budget.
That is incredibly smart. But again, we run into the scale problem, right? Once you know what works, how do you actually execute it 24 hours a day?
You utilize the second major function of the MarTech engine, which is marketing automation.
Automation.
Right. And to give you an idea of the scale here, by 2026, 40% of all marketing tasks in the Asia-Pacific region are expected to be fully automated.
40%.
Yeah.
That is a staggering amount of time saved. Plus, it completely eliminates human error.
Because a machine never sleeps, and it never forgets to send a follow-up email.
So how does that actually look under the hood?
Let's look at an automated flow combining Zalo marketing and MailChimp in Vietnam.
Okay.
A new customer signs up. The MarTech engine automatically sends a welcome message immediately. No human touches it. Then, the software is programmed to wait exactly 3 days, and it automatically sends a curated product list.
Based on their browsing, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then it waits until day 7. If the database shows they haven't bought anything yet, the API generates and sends a unique discount code to push them over the edge.
And it does this for every single user.
Every single one. It also constantly scans birth dates so that exactly 30 days out, it fires off a birthday voucher. And that specific automated flow boosts open rates by 62%.
Wow. Or there's the classic abandoned cart scenario.
Oh yeah, the one we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, in Taiwan, they link a Line official account with a Shopify store. So you put a shirt in your cart, you get distracted by, I don't know, your dog barking. and you close the app.
It happens all the time.
The system notices. The browser session cookie pings the server, which checks its database for your line ID. And without a human lifting a single finger, an API triggers a message to your line app reminding you about the shirt.
And that simple automated nudge recovers 21% of lost sales.
Just from a robot reminding you. But let me push back on this, though.
Sure.
If almost half of these interactions are being handled by a machine triggering APIs, doesn't the customer eventually feel like they are just talking to a robot? Doesn't scheduling every text and automating every email strip away the human touch that actually builds real brand loyalty?
You know, it seems counterintuitive, but the reality is a paradox. Automation, when executed correctly, allows for much greater personalization.
How so?
Well, think about a human sales clerk. They might see you once a month and still struggle to remember your exact shoe size or your favorite color. But the MarTech engine has infinite memory.
That's true.
It remembers every single preference you have ever shown, every click, every lingering look at a product, every past purchase.
And it uses that infinite memory to achieve the ultimate goal of all this technology, which is hyper-personalization.
Exactly.
This is really where the entire deep dive synthesizes for me. It's the perfect data feeding the automated engine to make you feel like the message was crafted solely for you.
The e-commerce giants are masterclasses in this. Platforms like Shopee, Lazada, and TikTok Shop constantly feed your views, your purchases, and your likes into recommendation algorithms to populate your feeds.
Just a constant loop of data.
Right. And in Vietnam, that level of hyper-personalization results in 30% higher sales and 24% more repeat buyers. It works simply because it reduces the friction of finding what you actually want.
There was a really fascinating example from Vinamilk in Vietnam.
Oh, the Formula One.
Yeah. They use their app to track the exact age of a customer's baby. So they don't just blast out a generic, hey, buy milk email to everyone.
No, because that would be useless to half their audience. The system calculates the child's age milestones and automatically sends perfectly timed suggestions for the exact stage of formula that baby needs at that specific month.
Along with relevant nutrition tips.
Right, and that level of utility solves a problem for the parent before they even ask, which boosts retention by 18%. We see similar utility with Jollibee in the Philippines.
I love Jollibee.
Same. Their app remembers your past orders to suggest hyper-specific add-ons, so if you always order extra gravy, the app stores that preference and prompts you for it next time, increasing conversion by 15%.
But the one that absolutely blew my mind was the Taiwan example, with platforms like Pichom and Momo tapping into real-time weather data.
That is top-tier MarTech.
Explain the invisible plumbing there to us, because that honestly feels like science fiction.
It's a brilliant use of API integrations. So the MarTech software is constantly communicating with local weather APIs. The moment the API reports a drop in barometric pressure and rain in your specific zip code, the software automatically tags your profile.
Okay.
In milliseconds, before your homepage even finishes loading, the system swaps out the standard HTML banner code for one promoting umbrellas and raincoats.
And that causes a 40% spike in conversions. It literally anticipates your immediate physical environment.
It's incredible.
It reminds me of walking into a really great local diner.
Yeah.
You know, the one where the waitress sees you walk in, already has your coffee poured exactly how you like it, and knows what you're going to order before you even sit down. MarTech is simply taking that intimate local diner experience and scaling it to millions of people simultaneously across entire countries.
That's a perfect summary. If we step back and synthesize everything we've covered today, it really comes down to a powerful synergy. Data is the foundation. It tells you the who, the what, the where, and the how much. It completely removes demographic stereotyping. Then, MarTech is the engine. It takes that behavioral data and turns it into fast, automated, deeply personalized actions at a scale humans could never achieve manually.
And together, they lower customer acquisition costs, massively increase sales, and build profound long-term loyalty.
Exactly.
It really makes you rethink your own digital footprint, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The main case study in our sources centered on a mid-sized fashion store in Taiwan with 20,000 customers. They were spending all this money on Facebook, Line, and SMS, but they had absolutely no idea what was actually working.
Their repeat buyer rate was stuck at an abysmal 12%.
Right. But based on what we just uncovered, you now know the exact playbook to fix that business. You segment based on behavior, you calculate the lifetime value, set up omni-channel tracking with identity resolution, automate the communication flows, and measure every single assist with multi-touch attribution.
It really is the definitive blueprint for thriving in the modern digital economy.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. Think about your absolute favorite online brand. You know, the one you are most loyal to.
The one you always go back to.
Exactly. The next time you are browsing their site and you get a perfectly timed discount code just as you're about to abandon your cart, or you see a product suggestion that feels like it literally read your mind, ask yourself, are you acting on your own spontaneous impulse? Or are you just beautifully segmented data moving exactly as predicted through their automated multi-touch attribution model?
That's a great question.
Keep exploring that invisible machinery, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.